Hello and welcome to Voice Memos. This is episode number 56, and I must admit, there's been a hiatus that is much longer than I was intending. Our entire family got very, very, very sick. And then immediately after, before she was even fully recovered, my middle child, her name's Sloane, she's 8 years old, had appendicitis. So then we were in the hospital and everything was crazy and wild. She is okay. We are okay. Shaken, but absolutely okay. And I'm actually really excited for you guys to listen to this episode today because I have a wonderful guest on. His name is Grant Herbal, and we're going to talk all about Substack today. How to leverage the platform, how to really lean into it for building community and sharing a message that God has placed on your heart. We get into like technicalities of writing, how to leverage notes, why writing even matters for ministry-minded Christian leaders and business owners. And honestly, it's just such a fun conversation that I think is going to leave you, that I know is going to leave you feeling very encouraged, very energized, very excited to lean into this platform if it's been something maybe that you're considering, or maybe if you're there and you're kind of puttering around and you're not 100% sure how to really optimize this space, this episode is going to be for you. I also think you're going to walk away with a lot of really practical resources to develop a more grace-filled approach that doesn't skimp on the importance of discipline when it comes to practicing your craft, specifically writing in this situation. But I think there's so much to be learned here because the fact of the matter is, as a business owner in 2026, you're also going to be writing, whether it's for sales copy, for content, for like your email list, like so much of the communications that we get to have with our community, which is such a blessing, is through writing and developing that craft, and developing that as a communication style. There's a lot of layers here, and Substack is such an incredible space to lean into doing exactly that. So I hope you love this conversation. Before we dive in, can I ask you one question? Pretty please. Do me a favor and leave me a review over on Apple podcasts, or if you're in Spotify, like click the little stars and leave us a 5-star review. And by us, I mean me because it's just me over here. And if you have negative things to say, just DM me instead, please, because I don't think I can handle the emotional bandwidth of a negative review right now. I gotta be honest. So with that out of the way, thanks for being here. Let's dive right on into the episode because we really do like dive right on into it, because that's kind of like what the deal is here at Voice Memos, right? We're here for conversation, we're here for dialogue, we're here for fun, for levity, and for practical strategies to grow your business and build the kind of life that God is calling you to build. It's gonna be so much fun. Okay, I'll stop yapping so I can yap more. You get it. All right, let's carry on. Thank you for coming. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here. That's for sure. It's good to meet you
Yeah,
in
it's so good to
person,
me.
so
I
to speak.
love the work that you do. I just think it's so cool.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, it's quite a it's been quite a journey.
Yeah?
But yeah, it's been good. It's been good.
Do you want to tell me about it? We're recording now if you're up for it.
Sure. As far as the writer's calling, etc.
Yeah, like how did it start? What do you mean by it's been quite a journey?
Well, I guess what I mean by that is it kind of started almost as just a whim almost. Not quite that. I was trying to find the right word to use, but
Yeah.
basically just something I wasn't sure how, what the readership would be or if it would resonate with people, but I had this idea that sparked with me that I read in a book that was called uh, The Storied Life. And it was this idea that writing can be worship or a form of worship.
Yeah.
And that really stuck with me. I kind of devoured that book, and it was nice because I felt like it spoke to me as somebody who, I don't really have a lot of people around me who are in the similar passion for writing or for just the humanities in general. And so it was kind of unique. And so anyway, I wasn't sure how many other people there were out there like that. And it's kind of been a great way to interact with a lot of people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. This is a good example. And yeah, it's kind of, I think it's been cool to watch how people have found it, impactful for them. So
Mhm.
that's about it. That's about the journey.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Growing something like that, and like, I feel like a lot of people say, "Oh, the hardest part is starting," and that can be hard. I don't want to downplay that, but I feel like the hardest part is staying like persistent and consistent and like growing that. And you've certainly done that, and it's cool to see. It's just really cool to see.
Yeah, that can be the hard part, especially because, well, personally, I've had a couple of there's been a couple of periods where I've gone a couple, 3, 4 weeks without posting anything just because I was focused on something else. And so I haven't, and then there's been other times where I'm like, it's Monday night. I got to get a post out tomorrow. And I stress about it.
Mhm.
But I've kind of found a middle ground of really what consistency looks like for me. So you just gotta kind of figure that out for yourself, I think, over time. It's been a little not difficult, but just a journey to find that rhythm that works for me.
Yeah, yeah. Somebody recently, I can't remember it was who shared it, but it was a concept that really blew my mind because I have very limited time to work. And they were talking about rather than sticking so tightly to like a posting schedule, stick tightly to the practice of writing. Like
Mm,
protect the time that it takes to show up and produce content. And maybe you finish the post by a certain day and maybe you don't, but like, can you just start to protect that time? And then when it's done, you publish it and then you carry on to the next one. And I was like, man, that's like the perfect middle ground for what I need and what a lot of like people who are starting something new or maybe have a limited time or capacity for whatever reason. um I feel like that's such a healthier mindset to come about it, right? Like there's times when we just kind of have to. I'm not gonna ever diss like this hustle mentality. I think sometimes there's a time for a holy hustle and you got to put your head down and do the work, but it doesn't have to always be like that. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, it's an interesting tension there because you do have hustle culture, which people are getting real turned off to, which I completely understand because there's so much of it that leads to burnout. And then you just kind of look at it from the outside and you're like, I don't really want to be like that. Like always thinking about what I should be working on. I need to be able to relax sometimes. So that's one side of it. And then the other side is like, but I also want to grow something and I want to have impact or I want to share or whatever it is. And to do that, you kind of do have to be consistent a lot of the times with the algorithms working the way they do and stuff. But yeah, part of what's been reframing for that for me is interesting that you mention the idea of just showing up every day, essentially, even if you don't get a post out that day, but just to make it a practice, so to speak.
Yeah.
I really, I think that's good advice because it's kind of the same way with our prayer life. I can point to times where I felt like I needed to finish this or get right with God in some way in order to have a productive prayer time. But that's a real backwards way of thinking about it. It's about the daily practice of just showing up and spending time. And I think there are a lot of parallels, not to elevate writing to some mystical experience, but there are a lot of parallels between writing, if you think of it as a spiritual practice, and prayer that I think can go well together. So, yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I remember I was, like, interviewing for my first ever, like, form it was a volunteer position at a Bible camp that I worked at for years. It was, like, where I met my husband. I ended up working there for a long time. It's called Blacklight Bible Camp, and they do, like, an LIT, so it stands for, like, a leader in training, and you volunteer for the summer as a teenager and support all of the different various roles based on the weeks, and I remember interviewing for it, and they were asking about, like, like what does your prayer time look like or Bible study time look like? Just trying to check out like spiritual formation and maturity level. And I was sharing, and I used so many words to describe what is basically a prayer journal. I had just never heard of somebody calling it that. I didn't know that was a thing that people did. And so I was trying to explain like I am constantly in conversation with God throughout my day, but then I also really like to like write and I was just like way over explaining it. And the guy who's interviewing said back to me like, "Oh, so like a prayer journal." And I was like, "That's not like a prayer journal." I felt so silly. I was like, "Oh yeah, that's what it is." Yep, that was a faster way to say that. Because of that reason, like there's so much goodness that can come out of something. Like even if you're not writing inherently a prayer, there is something very worshipful and prayerful about it based on our heart posture and the way that we're like pursuing Christ, I guess.
Yeah. And I think that was part of what made me feel like when I read that book I mentioned earlier, like, I don't know if I would have defined writing as a calling for most of my life or any part of it, but I just really enjoyed it. And I think that, well, and even just reading, I mean, there are plenty of people who don't like to read. There are plenty of people who don't like to write or don't, it's just not their thing. And plenty of people for whom it is their thing. Anyway, I think God, we have these different personalities and gifts and ways of expressing ourselves that are strengths for us. And it's nice to have that be named, I guess, and recognize that a little bit. Kind of a similar thing with that prayer journal you mentioned. You've been doing that for a long time, and then somebody kind of puts a spotlight on that and says, there are people that do that too. And it's kind of nice to find that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It gave me, like, terminology for it, and it kind of
Hmm.
validated it as a practice of, like, this has way more meaning than I had originally, like, it already meant something to me, it was already important, I had been doing it since I was a little girl, but yes, you're right, exactly, it kind of put a name to it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful stuff when that happens. So I think that's part of what's so great about Substack, actually. And I'm sure there are other platforms that would do something similar, but I found that the way you interact with people and stuff, and you kind of meet people or, comment routinely, you see similar people or the same people, and there's a sense of community out of that. So that's what's really
Yeah.
nice. It's perfect for somebody like me. So it worked out just great as a platform.
Yeah, yeah. It's cool, it's a cool space, it very much meets a need that has been felt for a while of, like, a place that's social media, that's not quite as noisy as other platform, or that's maybe a slower pace. Calling anything other than social media, I think, is silly. It's absolutely a social media platform, but there is a different vibe there. It's a different kind of feel, and in the same way that, like, if you go to, different restaurants, you get a different kind of atmosphere. It's a cool space.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. The restaurant analogy. Yeah. So have you been What's been your journey to Substack exactly?
Yeah, yeah. So I started in, like, the online business world ages ago and have, like, grown and evolved with a lot of different iterations of business. And my friend, one of my very closest friends, Christina Wallace, started on Substack and was like, Dusty, you would love it here. And she is a writer through and through. And I love to write a lot, but it's not the primary thing that I do. It's like a secondary way or a way to express other avenues of work that I do. But I still love writing. And she was like, this is like the perfect place for you to be able to merge those two things that you love. And I really, really, really love working with authors, particularly with Christian authors, because a lot of times what happens is, and I'm sure you know this full well, like publishing a book and isn't a fast track to income. And so a lot of times, especially a Christian writer who really, really believes in their mission and it's so rooted in truth and the gospel, and are like, the church is needing the words that they have to say, but also they like have to feed their families. And so what I do is kind of bridge that gap and help writers be able to earn an income and market their book and do all of the back end stuff that makes selling their book possible, because the world of publishing books is so different now. Like, it used to be you had a team of people who did the marketing and a team of people who did the sales, and then you were the writer and all you did was write. But it's not like that anymore. Like, the online space is so very different. The way that we do business is so very different, and especially that's true for authors. And like, if you don't already have a platform, you're like already starting so far behind, which is kind of the opposite of a lot of writers sort of like personality types. Not all writers, but a lot of writers are writers because they like to not be front and center, you know? And they
Hmm.
want their words to be front and center of the message or the story. And so that's what brought me over to Substack, in short, is like being able to go where my people are and support them and see, like, I really love this space where I can, one, learn from other people and be immersed in their writing and be immersed in their world, and by God's grace, offer support to those people as well and help them see that, like, your writing is absolutely a ministry and it's so important. And we can't neglect this business piece, because if you want your writing to go as far as it has the potential to go, there's some foundational stuff that maybe isn't your favorite, but we gotta address. And then I want to help you be able to do that really well. So yeah, that's kind of what brought me over there.
That's a good, yeah, really good platform for that for sure. That's a good advice from your friend. But
Yeah, yeah.
it's interesting because I definitely identify with that hesitance to, or that lack of desire to promote, I guess, to be the all-in-one person that has to handle the marketing and all this stuff, because you just want to sit down and just do your thing. And then also kind of branching into that, I've definitely felt the hesitance to promote in general. It seems like self-promotion is some kind of vanity project that you're undertaking. You're trying to get the word out, and you're like, well, look at my how good my writing is. That's how it feels, and you're trying to promote. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I've written a little bit about that lately, just because I think it's so important to create visibility. That's one of the things, again, about Substack, not to keep bringing it back to that I've really liked, because of their notes feature and the algorithm, and the way people share things and restack and all that stuff, that visibility is really attainable. But even then, like, even if it's easy, sometimes you're like, well, should I really expend energy trying to, game the system, so to speak, or get in there and actually try to promote? And that's how you think about it. But I think I've been thinking about it lately more as something that's creating visibility. You want to get the word out, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's like a church having flyers up around town, or a sign out front or something like that. They don't try to isolate themselves and just hope people show up. So I definitely think there's a reframe there for me, that I'm trying to kind of articulate a little bit, and hopefully that'll be helpful to people, because I think that's a real thing when it comes to
Yeah.
self-publishing, especially.
Yeah, you're right on the money. I have a article I've been working on, like a post I've been working on for months now, because I want to handle it so delicately, and I'm having a hard time articulating these concepts that, like, selling is service. Selling is an important aspect of ministry, and kind of dissecting, like, how can we sell as a Christian, because there's a line there, right? Like, it can absolutely become manipulation. I always think of, like, Uncle Ben in Spider-Man. He's like, with great power comes great responsibility. And learning sales skills is very much that. It can easily become a place of manipulation, and of, like, taking advantage of vulnerabilities, and that's yucky. We don't want that. And like, we have to sell in order to create the impact that God's asked us to create. And selling is so much bigger than and visibility and marketing, that kind of growth is, I think, a lot bigger than what we recognize it to be. And so it comes down to that discernment, like you're talking about, of, like, a lot of it has to sort of be worked out in process, which is messy and hard. And like, it's a hard thing to articulate. Something, though, that I like to often equate it to is, like, the quality of soil for a farmer. Like, if we kind of take morality, because money is not inherently moral, eyes on your work is not, there is no moral value there. It's so much the heart posture. And I think a way that I like to kind of equate that and help us to see that, like, money is a tool, visibility in and of itself is a form of currency, and that's a tool, is to think about, like, the dirt or the soil that a farmer is growing their plants in. Nobody is going to shame or guilt a farmer for being like, I really want high quality soil so that I can grow high quality food so that I can feed my family and my community. Everybody is going to say, yeah, that makes sense. Invest in high quality soil. And if the soil is bad, you throw it out and you get better soil, or you amend the soil. And if we're thinking about, like, our visibility or any other sort of metric that helps us to earn money and grow our work and do the work that God set before us, if we think about it from that perspective, as, like, how can I use this as a tool to sort of to steward the work that God's given us, that's He's set right before us, with intentionality and with surrender, I feel like kind of takes a lot of that shame and a lot of that guilt out of it, because then it can come from a place of, like, God didn't give me this place to just, like, hide it. Or it's like a light under a bushel situation, right? Like, we don't do that. God's called us to something different. And obviously there's, like, a lot of nuance there, and a lot of discernment, and a lot of, like, practice as we go. And something I'm constantly reminding my clients of, especially, is, like, God isn't here to trick us. Like, if we make a misstep, if our heart posture turns and pride starts to win, and we start to be coming at this from a place of manipulation or desperation, and the fleshy bits of us start to come out, like, God is so gracious to be like, no, come back. Let's redirect. Like, he's not not the kind of God who's like, haha, caught you in your sin. I knew you would do it. Like, he's like, no, get up. Let's try again. You know?
Yeah, that's a good word. I think that's crucial to understand, because I just can't remember if I've written about this much. A few years ago, before I can receive the gospel in full, I never exactly know how to phrase it because I was raised a Christian, but it was the end of 2019 where it just really became real for me. That's a whole other story. But prior to that, I felt like I had the gift of writing in some capacity. So I was like starting a novel over here or starting a blog over here, just half finished projects everywhere. And I think I liked the idea of it more than actually doing the work. But I also felt like I needed to do something for God. And I didn't have this kind of confidence that comes from, well, I've been reading Colossians lately, and Paul says to the people there, when you came to understand God's grace, essentially. I didn't have that. And so I was trying
Yeah.
to manufacture some effort that I was doing for God to make my position as a Christian worthwhile or productive. So all of that to say, when I would sit down and write for this blog, I actually had a blog that I don't even remember what it was named or anything like that, but it was something about looking at modern media, so like movies and TV shows, and finding the evil messages in those. So like you need to watch out. You should probably not watch this because there's some bad stuff in there. And again, I don't even remember what I talked about, but I'm sure it was not super good. But anyway, I tried to do that and I was trying to push it out. And then I thought, I didn't really, it was on WordPress and I didn't really know what I was doing at the time either. But the point is, I was trying to manufacture something that I was doing out of a fleshy effort.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I
Interesting.
recognized that I was trying to do something for God to accomplish something that I thought should be accomplished, but God was not part of that process at all. So, I mean, you can sit down and brute force or white knuckle your way to what you perceive as ministry, and God can always use something like that. But when you take a step back and, like you said, work from a posture of surrender and just being attuned with His will, praying alignment for that, then you can go full force on this because, like you said, God's not trying to trick you. He's not telling you that you are united with Him and that He's blessed you with every spiritual blessing and then saying, but you're on your own to figure out how to live the Christian life, whatever that looks like. So,
Right.
yeah, I think that's a super important distinction. And it's interesting that with selling that you mentioned, a lot of what people think about the manipulation tactics that come along with that turn people off is a salesman's trying to get in there and he's trying to understand, what do you value, what do you need, and what will solve your problem, how this product or whatever will solve that problem, or who do you want to be, how do you see yourself in an ideal scenario, and how this product or whatever it is will bring you to that outcome that you actually want. But when you look at it from a kingdom perspective, I think there's an aspect of meeting people where they are and doing something similar, but from a different perspective that says, here's how this can actually help you. And in that regard, it's definitely not the same manipulation kind of way that we normally think
Right.
about salesy tactics or something like that. So there's a whole different way to look at it that I think needs to be talked about. So I appreciate what you're doing in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, it's I think something to keep in mind, like if we're thinking about like when does sales become manipulative, is once you realize as the person selling, this actually isn't a good fit for this person. They're not ready for XYZ reason. If you keep pushing, that's manipulation. If you're weaponizing their emotions or their feelings against them, that's manipulation. But if you're bringing up stuff that they're already feeling and saying like, "Hey, I see you in this. This might be a really good solution for you. I know you're feeling scared. Let's talk it through." That's very different because you're guiding a person through a decision-making process. And that's really ultimately what sales really is helping a person make an informed decision. And I think something that I'm constantly telling my clients is that even if they don't buy, but they make a confident decision at the end, whether this is a good fit for them or not, in my mind, that's a successful sale. Like you're not earning the income there, but you are gaining the respect and the trust and the like loyalty from somebody who's like, oh, I actually really value that person's input. And maybe it's a not right now, but they'll probably come back later if you had a good connection and they're truly on the fence and they just decided no right now. If you're able to show up to that in a way that is aligned with the gospel in a way that is more Christ-like and guide them through that decision, then it's not a forceful manipulation of sales. Then it's, hey, how can I support you? How can I serve you? Because really, at the end of the day, business is about service, and that's the heart of ministry as well. And I would argue the heart of writing is like we're coming alongside people in that way, and we're serving them through entertainment and through story and through connection. And it's just all so integrated in such a beautiful, beautiful way. I just think it's so cool.
Yeah, that's well said. Actually, while you were talking, it reminded me of when I was much younger, I worked at Best Buy, and I sold cell phones. So I was in the cell phone department. And prior to that, I was in the computing department. But they always coach you like you're on commission, but you're not on commission at Best Buy. People always think you are. But you had to hit these metrics. You got to do this. That was the salesy part. And when I was selling in computers, I didn't really like it because the whole goal was to move somebody from the computer that they came in for, which is like $200, to something that's $600 or $700. And I mean, they would say things like, well, you need to make sure it suits their needs and stuff. But ultimately, if they left with a cheaper computer, they'd be like, let's work on why this happened. So the point is, it was definitely a salesy environment. I never felt great about that. When I moved to cell phones, I had a similar kind of feeling for a while, but then I became the representative for one of the carriers in particular that was way cheaper than the other ones. And I used it and I thought it had good coverage. So I would go around and people would come in with their phones from other carriers that were going to get an upgrade or whatever. And I would say, hey, listen, why don't you go with this one? Because it's actually going to save you so much money. There's no contract, all this stuff. So I had no problem. I was selling like crazy because it sold itself. It was easy because I knew that it was actually something that brought value to people's life. People are trying to save money, but they don't want to have bad coverage. And I think that's another good example, is that if somebody's way out there in the middle of nowhere, I check the map, this doesn't cover you, never mind, we're not doing this, because you could sell it to them. They go home and realize they can't text people or whatever. Obviously that's not going to work. Once I did that until I left the position, and I enjoyed that. Like, that was fun, and people seemed to interact well. I had people coming in bringing me like baked goods. One person did that.
That's awesome.
To say thanks. So the point
Any
is
job where you
that
can get free baked goods is a good job.
it was great. All my coworkers loved it too, because this person would always bring in enough definitely for more than me. So I'd share it with everybody.
That's awesome.
Which, anyway, the point is that I felt like I had something that was, it started to shift from that salesy thing to service that I was providing for people. That's how it felt, because I saw the value and the improvement it would bring to their life in that regard, because people are paying so much for cell phones and I give them a way to do the same thing for cheaper. So anyway, that was an analogy that I had, because in my personal life, that really had that shift for me. And I think that's critical. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah, yeah. As you have been on Substack, I was actually just reading right before we came on your post about, what did you know? It's about like for growing with notes. What do you call it? The 30-minute system I use to grow with Substack notes, which I'll link in the show notes for you guys, for you listeners. But I would love to hear, like, if you're willing to just sort of talk about that method, because I think that Substack, because it's sort of a newer platform, a lot of people are interested and curious, but like are hesitant to learn a whole new thing. And I think that it would be I would love to hear your take on it, because I really love the way that you structured that post.
Well, thank you. Where to start? So I guess if anybody listening who's not terribly familiar, Substack Notes is essentially the way to share a short form thing like Twitter or something, but it's not limited by characters in the same way. Or like a Facebook status update or something like that, so that there's a feed that you scroll through of short form content. You can share your longer articles on there, or you can just share a sentence or a picture or whatever it is, and people just scroll and they like and they comment. And if you're following somebody, then their posts may show up there as well, but it's primarily for the short form notes, as they call it, with a capital N. So when I first got on Substack, I thought of it like that, like Twitter or something like that, where it's this whole separate thing that I need to learn to figure out. And like, I mean, their whole writing courses on short form content and how to succeed with that and get followers and all this stuff. And I wasn't really interested in that because I mean, I just wasn't as familiar, and I prefer writing something that kind of takes the reader on a little bit of a journey that has a resolution and a middle and an end and all this that is usually longer. And so my first a few attempts, I was like, well, it's probably good to post something because that's what everybody's doing. And so my first few attempts were, I thought of it like a status update. I was just sharing little platitudes or something, or little thoughts that I had, or something like that. And those didn't get a lot of traction or engagement, which is fine. But I kind of started experimenting a little bit with the format and trying to remember. I think my first note that kind of took off, it was really about my experience with the gospel. And it was something like, I used to feel distant from God. And then it was something like, but then I realized, and now this. So it was kind of like a mini testimony.
Yeah.
And that one went really well. And I did another one kind of like that. And I started to notice that people really identify with something that they can kind of see themselves in a little bit, or their
Mm-hmm.
experience or their journey, or
Yeah.
speaks to something that they've gone through or are going through or recognize in themselves, something like that. Kind of, I think I mentioned this in one of those articles, is this provides this mirror moment that connects with people a little bit. So when I started doing that, yeah, they really kind of took off. And I was on Substack prior to starting the Writer's Calling, just barely. And so then I started shifting to naming the audience I was kind of trying to connect with, which was Christian writers. And that seemed to do pretty well too. So anyway, it's just a pattern that I noticed people really like, and they identify with something that presents something clearly, and I noticed, much like a longer form article, the notes that tended to do best were ones that kind of had that mini journey. So there was like, establish a problem, address the solution, and then provide the result, essentially.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the best way to phrase it, but something like that, like a little mini journey
The
in
little
a few
arc.
sentences. Yeah. So after a while, I then realized that I didn't have the mental capacity, the mental energy or time or something to think of two avenues, my long form and then notes. So I'm sitting there trying to think of a note, or something would pop into my head and I'd lose it. And then I had my ideas for long form articles. And I realized that I could just repurpose content from my long form articles. So that's a lot about what my 30-minute system, I call it,
Mm-hmm.
is just scanning long form articles for little excerpts, and then tailoring that to be a fully self-contained thought and posting it as a note. And that has saved me a ton of time. That way my notes are fully aligned with what I'm talking about in my long form. And I think there's
Mm-hmm.
some cross pollination that happens, because some
Yeah.
people might only read notes. They may never click through to your long form content. But my philosophy is, if you're talking about stuff that you talk about in both places, there's going to be people that
Mm-hmm.
naturally look at both over time. I think it's easier than trying to convince somebody who doesn't know what you're talking about or the value you might be providing to click through to a long form article than it is to provide similar value in short form, and eventually they move over. That's
Yes.
my thought anyway.
Yep.
So
Yeah, I think you're right
I
on
don't
the
know if that
money.
answers your question fully.
That does, yeah, that does answer, yeah. I like to refer to it as, like, an anchor content, so, like, if, like, the longer form post is, like, that anchor content, and then you're using that post to kind of guide the conversation and all of the other places you might be showing up online, so in this case, notes. What I loved about the way that you outlined this post is that you made it very, very practical for people. If you're listening and you're wanting to grow on Substack and you're starting to sort of experiment on that platform, or maybe take it more seriously, I would really highly suggest taking a look at this article that he wrote about it, because I felt like it was so helpful. I think you laid it out so. I think a lot of people get really in their heads about it, and because you laid it out so practically, it kind of takes some of that like emotion out of it and be like, oh no, there's like a system. I follow the system and I do the thing, and then we see what happens. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. But that was a big struggle. I had the notes guide, so to speak, in two parts, just to break it up because it ended up being pretty long. That was part of the thing I struggled with, which goes in which part, and is it clear like why this is leading to this, etc. So that's good to hear that it worked as far as making it a clear progression. That was my goal anyway. So yeah, it's a process to learn. And part of what I talk about as well in that is just the same thing we were mentioning earlier, is this idea of notes as a way to create visibility and how to reframe the thought from icky self-promotion to bringing attention to whatever God is doing through you. And so, yeah, I guess that's it.
Yeah, I love that. I think I tend to be like overly, how do I phrase this? I could get on a soapbox about how I really don't like sort of, how do I phrase it? Like, I don't like the monetization of the word calling. I think there's like a lot of nuance there, but it's tricky, right? Because like my whole job, like I'm a discipleship first business consultant and I do strategy and operations for people. And so I'm absolutely helping people walk in alignment with their calling. But there's so much nuance there, because to think that your paid work is your only calling is, in my opinion, just ludicrous. Or to think that if you're not having a business, if you're not an entrepreneur, or you're not a writer, or you're not growing an online platform, then that you don't have a calling, that also is crazy. So like there's a lot of nuance there in the way that we talk about it, because we have to be, as a Christian, as an entrepreneur in general, and then all the more as a Christian entrepreneur, we are in a position of leadership, and we have to be so careful about the way that we carry that. And there's trial and error, right? Like we mentioned earlier, like when I make a misstep, God's going to correct me, and it's something that I'm still wrestling through how to talk about. But I think what I really resonated with your work, and why I really love this, like the way that you write and how you talk about writing as a Christian, is that you do a great job at entering into that nuance in a way that I feel is just so beautifully done, to be honest. Like it's a hard topic to broach, and it's cool to see. Yeah, I feel like I'm just gushing a little bit, but it's just cool to see the way that you go about that, because there's nothing wrong with pursuing a business, and it absolutely might be something that God's called you to. I can't speak on behalf of God's will for your life, and I don't think there's anything wrong with using that language in marketing or in your writing, but it's something you have to be careful about. It's like one of those things where, like sales, we want to be discerning and seeking God's will and not looking to push our own agenda. And I just think it's cool the way that you push that.
Praise God. I'm glad to hear that, because that was one of the things that has been very critical to how I interact or present, is that I don't want to be the voice of God. I don't want to tell people this is your calling. Like if you feel like you're good at writing, I'm not going to tell you that that's your calling.
Yeah.
Even if it is, I'm not going to be that person, because there has to be a way to foster hearing that from God. And I think one thing that was so helpful to me was identifying the distinction between identity and vocation. And I think calling can be on either one of those things. So, I mean, scripturally speaking, we are called according to his purpose. We have to be able to rest in our identity first. And I do talk about this a lot, because we tend to pull identity from things that fluctuate, which can be, when we confuse our identity with our vocation, something we're doing, if it's doing well or doing poorly, our self-worth can fluctuate along with that. And so I think even if you are called to write, and whatever that looks like, for some people, it might be a direct ministry saying God loves you, etc. Like that's their writing mission. It could be somebody talks about things that you wouldn't think is intrinsically godly. I always use photography as the example. It's the one that pops into my mind, but it could be cooking or just like anything.
Yeah.
You see people start blogs on these things. That might be your calling or whatever. But all of that is independent from your core identity as child of God. And so once you have that right, it becomes really easy to separate your vocation from your identity. Then you can proceed. And like you said, be open to how the Spirit leads. I mentioned this in one of the articles, but maybe God says you need to stop writing for a while, or maybe this isn't the best I have for you, or something like that. And you may think one way and later think another way as God's leading, but as long as your hands are open and surrender on that, I think we also tend to overthink and wait for the perfect sign for what is our quote unquote calling and say, I'm not going to move until I know for sure. Or in other words, we put too much introspection on trying to discern a calling.
Okay.
And once you have your identity settled as well, then you might find that God says, you'd like to do this, go ahead and I'll bless it. Or he may direct you somewhere else. It all comes from that core of knowing who you are first. And that's part of the nuance that was helpful for me. And I hope that comes across because yeah, I think that's critical. But it's a fine line. And like you said, you don't want to ever be the voice of God for somebody. So
No.
always pointing back
Yeah.
to that.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And I think reiterating that point that like what you're saying is that even when we make a misstep, our God is so good to redeem everything. Like because we maybe made a misstep doesn't mean that God won't use it for his glory and for our good and for the good of those around us, because he will. That's just how cool God is. But and let's do our very best to be intentional and be surrendered and seek Christ. I think Noah comes to mind. Like the amount of strategy he would have had to build an entire ark. Like God gave him plans, but he didn't give him every single step. It wasn't like he had like a whole manual. Like Noah still had to make the blueprints, Like he had to do so much prep work, and there would have been so much strategy involved and so many processes and systems involved. And he would have had to have worked really, really hard. And I can't but wonder, like, what was the mind game going on in his head? Like, I know that he trusted God, but to trust God doesn't mean 100% trust all the time, because he's still human. Like, I'm sure there were times when he was like, what am I doing? This is crazy. I'm confident of that. And it's just cool to see, like, we still get to see God have the glory through that whole messy process, like, because he chose to be surrendered. Like, Noah doesn't go about things perfectly, guaranteed, but he does choose to seek Christ and to walk with him and to ask him for direction. And God is so faithful to provide the outcome. Like, it really comes down to, like, what I'm constantly saying is, like, our job is faithful obedience and God's job is outcome. And it's just cool to see the way that God, like, carries us through that whole process. Like, he's just so good to us. It's neat to see.
Yeah. Amen. I've been I had this imagery in my mind that I may incorporate for the writer's calling, because I think of the spiritual life like a river, and our calling is to get in the water, and so that's the first thing. I mean, the river imagery is present throughout Scripture. The rivers of life that Ezekiel talks about, and the water of life, and all this stuff, and I think as we are surrendered, we go with the current of how God's leading and all that. And once you're immersed in that way, in your relationship with God and hearing his voice and all that, then can come the outpouring. And what that looks like is different for everybody, but it always needs to come from the source. Again, in Colossians, Paul says that he labors with Christ's strength in him. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's probably not directly related to what you were just saying, but the point is that we're not doing it on our own. We're doing it out of
Yeah, I think it was related.
a source
I
that,
get the connection.
okay, good.
Yeah, yeah,
Still
I got
thinking
it.
through that one. So it'll come together
Yeah,
later.
and yeah, you're right. We're not doing it on our own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. It's interesting to see as well your side of it with the sales and, the business side of it, where I've been very specifically focused on writing, of course, but so much of the principles are the same throughout any vocation, but especially with what you're describing. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a neat industry to be in, and I feel really blessed to be in the position that I'm in. For however long God has me here, it's just been really cool to see him at work, because yeah, just that's the end of the sentence. It's just really cool to see him
Yeah.
at work, Yeah, yeah. Speaking of, a question I usually ask at the top of the show, but we just got right on into it, and I'm very much here for it. But as like a fun, like rapid fire question is, if you were to describe, like, if your work that you do was like a coffee order, what would it be?
Wow, that's an interesting question. How do people normally answer that? Or like, how do you phrase it? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, like, so, like, if there was, like, if you were in a cafe, what what order drink do you feel like best is like a personality match or like an experiential match or however you want to equate that in your mind with the work that you offer? So I had Kristen LaValle said that her work is like a flat white because she was like it's a comforting drink, it's a warm drink, but you have been in the coffee world for a while if you're ordering a flat white. It's not an impulse order. Like you're probably familiar with what's happening. And she was like, the people that I'm working with usually experience a lot of hurt or a lot of pain, or they're really wrestling through something. So like this isn't new to them, but they're here looking for comfort. And I was like, wow, that's a really good way to say that. So
That is a
there's an
good way
example.
to say that. Okay. At first, I was thinking I had to make up a coffee
No, no,
order,
no.
and I
Use an
thought I'm
existing
not
drink,
good
but
enough
it
for
can be
that.
anything in a cafe.
Okay. Well, it's funny because as you're describing that, just this morning I went and I got coffee, and I can't remember the name of it. They had a special name for it on the board, but it was dark chocolate and mint latte. I think that might work well for me because my goal, at least the way I think, and so hopefully this will probably come across in what I talk about, but is there's a layer of depth there, which I would equate with the dark chocolate, so to speak, some kind of deep flavor and richness that comes through an experiential relationship with God. And then there's the notes of the mint, which are higher and they have a little more to them, but they're fainter. They kind of blend into the rest of it. And that is, at least in my perspective, how to execute on this, so to speak. So if you're a writer, the depth of it is that experiential relationship. And then as you kind of come to the surface of that is how that is expressed in an effective way, whether that be how to utilize Substack notes or how to get started on Substack, which is my primary focus right now. But just in general, being a writer, what are you writing is kind of intertwined with that, but also clearly separate. So I
Yeah.
think that's how I describe it. I think that works.
I think that works perfectly. Nailed
Good.
it.
I'm
I think
glad
that's
I ordered that.
exactly what it is. That also sounds delicious.
It was, yeah.
That's awesome. I love a mocha that's like more of a dark chocolate rather than like a Hershey's sort of milk chocolate.
Yeah,
So
agreed. I didn't
delicious.
think I did, but I do. Now I know that is the case. Yeah, dark
That's awesome.
chocolate. It was an acquired taste for me, I guess. But if you do it right, it's really good. So that's a whole other
I
tangent.
love dark chocolate so very much. So very much. It is not an acquired taste. It is just my taste.
Got it. Okay. Got it. Personal taste. Well, they say, they say a certain percentage of dark chocolate is actually healthy for you. I don't know if that means you eat as much as you
It's
want, but
beans. It's like
yeah,
vegetables,
exactly.
really.
Yeah,
So is coffee while we're at it. This is my
that's true.
salad.
That's a really good point.
That's positioning, my friend.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good lesson. Yeah, I like that.
Okay, what's something like, I guess, because we just sort of dove right on into the conversation, and I'll do an intro at the top of the show to share with like who you are and how people can connect with you and stuff. But like, I guess I would love to hear more about the work that you do in particular. Like, how are you coming alongside people? How are you supporting people? Tell me a little bit more about like the practicalities of what that looks like.
I think one of the big things is how, again, Substack it facilitates a community, in my opinion. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a ton of experience with the other platforms, but something like Medium, I mean, you can have comments and stuff like that, or even social media where everybody's kind of like Twitter, where there are comments and there are retweets and stuff, or X, sorry.
Oh yeah,
I,
the
I don't know
artist
if I'll ever
formerly
get
known
used to
as.
that. It's like on those larger sites or whatever, you kind of feel like you're just adding to the noise sometimes, or at least I do.
Yeah.
Or you're just, even if you're thoughtfully commenting on somebody, it's just, I don't know, it's different. With
Mm-hmm.
Substack, I've definitely found like and maybe it's the way the algorithm puts people together, but you definitely feel like you're in a certain section of the platform where you meet with like-minded people just by it, I guess, the algorithm.
Yeah.
And you kind of get a deeper window than social media into somebody because a lot of the people that are on there are writers or they're sharing in some capacity. And they tend to be a little more vulnerable and encouraging. And so I think with that, really has fostered community. And then plus there's a chat feature, which is really something I've not utilized to its full potential, but each publication that you have can have its own chat. So anybody can do it. And if people are resonating, whatever, that you can have a little more conversational interactions than you would in comments. And so I think one of the big things is just that, and this is facilitated by that, is recognizing that these are people on a journey, and especially if they're resonating with something that you say or vice versa, that you really connect because you recognize that you're both experiencing something together in that moment.
Yeah.
And so I think being really present with how you interact with people instead of just having their comment or something that they're saying be another, just reduced to an interaction, some in your mind, like another metric to track. Well, this only got this many restacks, or this only got this, but recognizing that this is a moment where somebody experienced something and you were part of that, or again, vice versa. So anyway, I think that level of communication makes it a little bit easier to be encouraging to people and to feel like you're speaking directly to somebody through your writing, rather than trying to just cast something out there and trying to get the algorithm to pick it up, or whatever it is.
Mhm.
It feels like there's an actual face to the people that are interacting with you. So I'm hoping to, in the future, because I haven't really figured out how to facilitate this, but would be to do some kind of like workshop or whatever you want to call it, where people can actually talk and, have a prayer and really support. But I haven't really crossed that bridge yet in terms of learning the system, but I know it's possible. But anyway, I think it's a matter of just in general reminding people who they are and what our purpose is, and helping them to live according to that, essentially, through whatever deeper connection you can find. And I think Substack's been really good for that. So hopefully that answers that
Yeah.
question a little bit.
It does, absolutely does. And I can hear the questions now, especially so I run a mastermind and like a group mentorship program called the Percolator. And this cohort, several of the members are working on like establishing and growing a Substack. So like they're just sort of starting to come over. They're feeling very burnt out on other social media platforms, and it's not exclusive to them. Like I have lots of clients that I've been working with who have been hungry for this exact kind of community that Substack is able to facilitate in ways that other social media platforms aren't right now, or that maybe we once found in other platforms like Facebook or Instagram, or or X, I guess is what we're calling it today.
Yeah.
But, and what would your advice be for them, for the person who's like truly like in the very beginning stages, like setting up their account? Cause the pushback that I'm getting a lot is like them really holding tightly to having it be a certain way, or wanting to kind of have it set up correctly from the start. And my advice is always, that's a good intention. And I love that you want to create good work, but we got to just kind of create some consistent B- work sometimes and just take some messy action. And like, I also really want to set them up for success in that way. So what kind of advice would you give to the person who is truly like at the very beginning stages and just starting to grow on Substack?
Yeah, I've definitely been in the position you're describing. Like, you want it to be perfect. You want to have everything sorted, and then you'll publish. Highly, highly reinforce what you are saying there to just get something out, because it's a lot easier to rearrange things that you already have out there than it is to set it up perfectly in the first place, especially when you don't have, like, for example, with the Substack homepage, you can customize how it looks based on how your featured post is versus your other posts, or have categories of posts and how they display. But unless you have like 10 articles or something, it's not going to make any difference because you don't have things to
Yeah.
populate there.
Right.
Or it uses one article in all those places and then it looks weird and spammy. So
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
that's the big one. And like, for example, with Substack, you can monetize, you can offer paid subscriptions. My best recommendation, and I do want to kind of systematize this just a little bit, because there's a lot of advice out there on how to actually start, like the nuts and bolts of starting on Substack, and those are all good. But yeah, it's the big picture, not necessarily step by step, but what you actually need to do. And what you actually need to do is just don't worry about turning on paid subscriptions. Leave everything free at first. That's my first recommendation, because it asks you and it pushes that pretty hard when you first sign up. Do everything for free. Get a profile picture on there, and then just make your first post. I don't know if your people are coming from other platforms, they might already have certain posts that they might want to start with. That's fine. Don't worry if you would rather do long form content, get a few long form posts out before you even worry about notes. That would be another advice that I have. Because, like, I personally believe it's a lot easier to pull notes from long form or from the ideas you formed in a long form post than it is to generate those if that's not how your mind works. Like, for example, personally, if I was going to make a video essay or something on YouTube, I'd be much more likely that person who's making a 2-hour video than somebody who's good at TikTok or something like that. My
Right.
mind doesn't
Yeah.
work like that. So
Yeah.
anyway, so just the minimum viable Substack publication. That's the number one thing. Just get it out there, because I mean, there's so much you can do, like having a stripe across your homepage that has different messaging for whether people are subscribed or whether they're paid subscribers,
Mhm.
or whether you want them to share your post. Like, you can get in all that minutia later and slowly, and then it's a lot less overwhelming. Also, eliminates having to think about Substack is kind of trying to push video a little bit, and you can host a podcast on there. Like, for me, you kind of feel like, well, now I have to build a multimedia empire on Substack.
Mm-hmm.
But I've definitely learned that you just want to get something out there, and maybe nobody reads it at first because it's not perfectly optimized, but that's okay, because Substack's algorithm resurfaces things. I'm always coming across things that say from the archives, and then it just kind of shows you something it thinks will be interesting, even if the person published it a year prior.
Yeah.
The point is, you don't need your first post to be perfect, or your second or your 10th one perfectly optimized for Substack. Another thing that I've heard people think, like, that can be an obstacle is the SEO side of things
Yeah.
when they're setting it up, which I would also say not to worry about just yet. I know it's good to have your own domain and tweak those things and stuff like that, but I've also found that Substack's SEO isn't as customizable or as, like, fully in depth as some other tools are, but it shows up on Google pretty good, actually, even if you just publish an article without tweaking any of that stuff. So,
Yeah.
kind of a long answer, but just
Well,
get
and
a few
SEO is
posts
meant
out.
to help people find information they're looking for. So it's if you write like a human, most of the time it'll SEO will do it's exactly what it's meant to do.
That is so true. Actually, this might be kind of related to the initial question. What I've always come to believe is that, again, you can get caught in all this minutia with SEO optimization and tools and tactics and making sure that your Substack is set up for success, in quotes, which isn't a bad thing. But you can get so caught up in that the content is impacted because your mind's kind of divided. You're trying to build over here and you're trying to write over here. I'm very content first in terms of making the most quality and the most value that you possibly can. And everything else just seems to go with that. I feel like a lot of times when people are saying, I'm not getting traffic for this reason or that reason, it's because their content, for some reason, is either non existent or isn't providing that value. So, definitely content first. That will always trump all the other settings you can tweak, is just make quality, helpful, genuine, or vulnerable content. In this
Yeah, yeah.
particular case, it will always be the best result. So, yeah. Anyway, I think that's my very long answer to that question.
That's really, really helpful, and it's the kind of the encouragement I think we all need from time to time is the, like, don't get all stuck up. I come constantly saying, like, foundations over flourishes, like, focus on the quality, focus on the priorities that you have at this particular time, and all the extra stuff, it's not that it doesn't matter, but it doesn't need to matter as much as the foundational elements. And something that you mentioned too is, like, earlier, you were saying that, like, if you like writing long form content, focus on creating a few long form pieces before you even fiddle around with notes. And I think that brings up a really good point. Like, if you're gonna take some time at all before you start to really lean into Substack, is kind of consider, like, it doesn't have to be set in stone, but just to start to think about, like, how do you want to show up in that space? Like, is writing short form content what you would prefer, or do you like to write long form content? Like, lean into what feels fun and natural, because at first you're probably not going to get a whole lot of external validation. And if you really hate creating the process and nobody's telling you you're doing a good job, then why are you there? Like, choose the stuff that comes naturally, that feels fun, that stretches you in a way that is, like, beneficial for you, not in a way that exasperates. That's more work than it needs to be. Synonyms.
Yeah, I got
You know?
what you meant. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It can be overwhelming and you don't even know where to start. You don't have an entry point. So
Mhm.
just make the entry point the thing that you understand and good at, you enjoy the
Yeah.
writing, and just put that up there. A good example is like with me, I tend to get hung up, or I have in the past, with posting a long form piece because, I have to have the right header image,
Mm.
which again
Yes.
can be good because if you have somebody share it on social media, the header image might show up there and all that stuff. And it's good to have one that kind of relates to your topic and all that. But it'd be better to post something without a header image. If that's your obstacle and you can't find the right one and all this stuff, just post
Mhm.
it and you can go back and add it later. Um, it's just like, that's a good example of a silly thing for me to get hung up on. And also, I started with using header images that had this kind of theme of somebody sitting at their writing desk, but I've switched that to something that's a little more like, I use kind of like brand colors and a consistent font if I'm using words. And it's just a simple icon on a solid color background for the header image. And the point of saying that is that I kind of had to figure that out as I went. Like, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this exactly, but I also want it to be clear that it's something, it comes across as a little more polished. So I like that, but I didn't kind of find something that worked for me there until I was many posts in already. So the point is, you can course correct later if you want. And that's just a minor
Yeah.
example. Or it might be
Yeah.
true of your topic too. If you initially start talking to Christian writers, you may eventually expand to any type of content creator or something like that. Nothing's set in stone. And so that's why it also doesn't need to be perfect first, because it's probably going to change later anyway as you grow and you get feedback and all this stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, just
Yeah.
go for it. Just
Yeah,
start.
yeah, yeah. I think you're right. That piece of advice that it's probably going to change is, like, it will change. Like, it just is going to change. Like, the way that the business that you start with, or the work that you start doing in the beginning, is going to look different, because you as a person are going to grow and change. Like, you as a person are going to think new things and have new challenges and want to talk about different kinds of topics from different perspectives. And I think that's good advice for, like, anybody starting any sort of project, whether it be writing or a business or a service or anything in between, because if we hold so tightly to, and we spend so much time overthinking it, and we never get to the doing of it, we never have this fight. Like, so much has happened is learned in the process of it, is taking the action. So I think that's such incredible advice. I think that's such incredible advice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it comes from experiencing that myself over and over again.
Yeah.
Eventually you learn
Mhm.
a little at a time. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any, like, rhythms or routines that you feel, whether it's a small thing or a big thing or anywhere in between, interpret this however you wish, that you feel really supports, like, your writing practices and supports the work that you're doing to, like, kind of help set you up for success?
Yeah, I mean, very practically, taking walks couldn't be more beneficial. Like, just no podcast and no music or whatever, just take a walk. It's where I am getting harder to do that outside. It's pretty cold, but somehow just create a situation where, even if it's a short amount of time, where your brain is low grade bored in some way. For me, that's taking a walk. It could be going for a drive, or it could be sitting in a room if you can do that. But that that's where all my ideas come like the best. And that's where I've felt God actually speak to me, is in just that little low grade boredom. Some people might be able to do that right before they go to bed. I usually just fall asleep, so it doesn't work for me.
What is that like? What a dream. I want that.
Yeah,
My husband's
yeah.
like, we watch a movie and he's like falling asleep as we're watching the movie. And he's like, I'm so sorry I keep falling asleep. And I was like, what? You have a superpower. Don't hide that under a bushel of sleep.
It is a superpower.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so that's the first one. But then I'm going to start talking about this a little bit more because it's been a slow realization for me, but also it's a good example of um, kind of a shift in focus, not for the whole publication, but for some topics I'm going to be covering because of
Yeah.
new insights I've received or something like that. But I talk about my time that I spend with God as a secret place. And when I literally have a place where I go and I sit down and I spend time with God, ideally for an extended amount of time, like half an hour or something, but sometimes it's very short. And that's the place where I go in a physical way. But then there's the place where I go in a physical way, this office where I actually sit down and write. And a lot of times those
Mm-hmm.
feel like separate activities because I'm moving from one thing and now I'm in focus writing mode or productive mode.
Yeah.
And so I've started to think of anything I do in a productive way, whereas previously, like we talked about years ago, I might be doing out of trying to manufacture something important that I thought was important. Now I think about that time I spend with God as something that is carried over into the act of producing and stems from it directly. I don't know if other people think like this, but just mentally not separating the two things, your productive time from your receiving time. Your output comes from what you have been receiving. And I mean, just practically, even you think about somebody who's writing, you need practical experience to draw from. And that's part of what makes writing so powerful is that you have your voice and you have your experiences and your whatever it might be that goes into it that makes it unique. And it's the same thing, especially as Christians who are doing anything that we would put under the realm of productivity, whether it's selling or starting a business or writing. All of that
Yeah.
comes from what we receive. And as Christians, that comes from God. So it's expanding the role of our time with God to be including what we are producing. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that sums it up. I always try to not come across like I'm elevating a certain thing, like romanticizing it, like it's this
Yes.
pious thing to do in and of itself. But because I have fallen into that trap. I think everybody romanticizes the idea of writing at some point. It's hard not to,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you feel like that's your thing. But yeah, having that be a time where your posture is still aligned in receiving from God and producing out of that. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. It makes me think of, and I cannot remember who said it, and it would be hilarious if it was you, because it may have been. But I saw somebody, it was a post on Substack that said, what if we stop? It was something to the effect of, I'm heavily paraphrasing, but something like, what if we stopped trying to do everything for God and started trying to do everything with God? And that I feel like really speaks to what you're saying here of like, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing something for God and for his glory, but this mindset shift is different because if I'm doing it with God, I'm still doing it for him, but also in step with him. And I feel like it might be a better way. That has really transformed the way that I'm thinking about work, even work that isn't work that I'm like earning money for or people are seeing, like all of that unseen work, like doing the dishes and taking care of my children and or all of the back end stuff in our businesses that people don't see, like setting up your Substack account and making your website and all of that stuff that's like unseen work. Like all of that still is work. It's two, still really important and can absolutely be an extension or not even an extension, can actually still be a place of worship or a place of where we're still receiving something from Christ, even in that output. That's
Yeah.
really good to think about.
Yeah, it's like you said, sometimes, I mean, you are doing something for God, but also language can be important in reframing that a little bit because
Yeah.
At least the way I used to think of it, things I was doing for God, you kind of feel like an employee. It's like the story of the
Oh.
prodigal son, and the brother had done all these things, and he says, "You never threw a party for me." And so the brother was in the mindset of an employee or a servant, or he had a transactional relationship with the father. I've done this for you.
Yeah.
Why haven't you done this for me? Whereas we, as children of God, we have access to the entire kingdom, all the riches of the inheritance that the Father gives us. And so we operate from a completely different mindset. And so that's, to me, that's the idea of what for God means a lot of times, is doing something in a servant mentality. And again, the language is tricky because we do serve God, but an employee
Right.
to an
Yes.
employer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah.
no, go ahead.
Was gonna say, I was thinking about it from the perspective of like in a relationship with a person. Like if I'm gonna spend time with my husband, for example, I could absolutely do something for him, like I don't know, wash the dishes or do something like that. That's like meant to be like an act of service to him. But and that has value. That has importance. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. That's really kind of me, and that's good for everybody, right? Like it's good for our whole home. But also, like there's another way I can spend time with him and do something with him, cook together, or we could do something together. And then how much more fruitful is that time going to be? Like it's not inherently, I think sometimes that it's not so much so that it has to be one is better than the other, but if we're only doing stuff for and never with, then we miss out on communion and we miss out on like quality time and we miss out on relationship really, because then it's like you're saying it's only transactional. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with transaction from time to time, when that's our only basis for a relationship, it starts to get disingenuine.
Yeah. Yeah. That's well said. I completely agree with that. And you can, I mean, I don't know. This is a whole other rabbit trail. You can
Bring it.
slip into the lane of only doing things for God and feeling like that is relationship because I'm doing all
Mm,
these things for God.
yeah.
So I'm good, or I'm trying to be good. I think at the core, when you operate like that, you ultimately don't ever feel secure in your relationship. But sometimes it's easier to settle for distance depending on what your image of God looks like. And again, if you see him as somebody who's kind of harsh or waiting for you to fail or saying, well, if you don't figure out your calling right now, you're going to go off on your own and I'm not going to be any part of that. If that's your image of who God
True.
is, then
Yeah.
it's stressful and it's easier to keep him at a distance where you say, well, I'm doing things for him, so we're probably good, than it is to say, look at the father like the prodigal son did when he came home with arms wide open and willing to take him in, not as the servant he was planning on positioning himself as with his rehearsed speech, but as uh, he puts the ring and the robe on him and he says, all that I have is yours. And so when that's your image of God, and in relationship that you're being invited into, it's a lot easier to produce something in a way that is spiritually fulfilling than it is to run the rat race in a way, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was a game changer for me. And it seems like based on, things I've heard, it's a common thing to slip into that kind of production for God rather than with him. So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. I know for sure I have experienced that. I think the first time I really started to grow online, I was running a women's ministry, but I was it very much became like ministry was my idol. It very much became like, look at all these cool things that I'm doing. I wanted to want to have it be more genuine. Like it was, I see God's hand in all of it. Like we said earlier, like he absolutely redeemed all of it. And I'm so endlessly grateful. And I didn't handle it very well. Like I didn't have the accountability that I needed in place. I didn't have the spiritual mentorship that I needed to be in the relation or in the role that I was stepping into. There's so many things that I feel like I look back and think, sweet Dusty, what were you doing, my girl? But it's cool to also look back and see how God blessed so much of my missteps and used it for his glory And then, because God is so good, and I have always said the prayer, and I hope that I always continue to say, is like, if this isn't for you, if I'm not in alignment, just take it away. Because I don't think I have the ability to see that. Like, to be honest, like, I get so caught up in my own little world, and I'm over here doing whatever I'm doing, and I have a really hard time seeing my own motives sometimes. So I'm going to need you, God, to just show me or just take it away, because I can't. And he did. He took it away. And at the time, I was devastated. I was heartbroken. I was so sad because I spent so long building something and I put so much work into it, and it felt, I don't know, almost like a slap in the face at the time of me being like, but God, I did all of this for you and you're taking it away. But now I can look back and be like, what a gracious God. He did literally exactly what I asked. First of all, how sweet that he answered that prayer so directly. And it was so kind. And the fact that he took it away from me when he did, before it became this big giant thing, like, there's just, I see God's protection and God's hand in all of it, because, like, I don't ever want to be, and even then I didn't want to be in a place where I was doing things for God. I knew that that was logically not in alignment with the kind of person God called me to be, or in alignment with who Christ is, or who God's called me to be, or any of us to be, right? But I was so just in my own little world that I couldn't see it. And so I understand that struggle so, so deep. And since then, it's been like a hesitation in me to, like, I'm so scared I'm going to fall into that same pattern. And recently, kind of to your point, is seeing how, even whenever, just seeing how God can bless the process even in the production stages, and seeing how God is like constantly directing me and constantly guiding me has just been such a gift, because I can now, with much more mature eyes and a heart more eager to seek truth and less eager to seek my own growth, because I've seen where that leads. Like, it wasn't good for me or for my family or for anybody, really. I guess I say all that to say that, like, I understand that deeply. Yeah.
Well, part of it is maturing. We're all maturing, and part of that comes from experience. And um, it's kind of the same thing we talked about earlier. It's like you gotta write it out. You gotta get it out there. You have to experience, and you have to learn from it. But the important thing is, like you said, just trusting that God, uh, His trustworthy. Essentially, there's no reason to think that, even if it's painful in the moment like you went through, the only thing that where you can really know that is by coming to experience how he brought good out of that seemingly
Oh, yeah.
bummer of a situation. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's powerful stuff.
Yeah, it is really powerful, and it's cool that I got to see God's goodness in the middle of it while it was happening. I got to see it as, like, I looked back and look on it, and now even today, like, I'm equipped with skill sets that I would not have otherwise had, and there's no way I would be able to come alongside business owners in the way and the capacity that I can now had I not done all of that before. So, like, it's cool to see God be like, you didn't handle that well, my love, but we're going to pick up the pieces and we're going to try again. And it's just, it's all God's grace. Like, it's all God's glory. I can't do any of that on my own. Well, I mean, I tried, didn't go well, but
Right.
so it's just, it's really cool to see. Um, and I guess my encouragement there for the listener is that, like, is just to kind of go to say exactly what you said, is that, like, God is trustworthy and God is good and God is kind. But we can't really know that firsthand. We can know that on a logical level, but we can't really know that firsthand until we start to do exactly like we were speaking about, is like doing things with him and genuinely seeking. Because you don't trust a stranger walking down the side of the road. Nobody does. Like, you can start to have a surface level of trust, but to make that trust as deep as it needs to be in order to really lean into the ways that God's asked us to lean in, there's a certain amount of, like, work on our ends we need to do to come to him and say, okay, God, like, I want to know you more. Like, I want to understand you more. I want to trust you more. Very much the, like, help my unbelief thing. And that's something that I have learned through the years of me being like, okay, I really want to do God's will. And if I actually really want to do God's will, I need to know what God's will is. And if I want to know what God's will is, I need to know God.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can make a goal and then just work yourself backwards to that. And it always comes back to physically, literally spending time with God and
Yeah.
learning to discern. Discernment is like a muscle, in my opinion. It builds with
Totally is.
use.
Yes.
Only way to do that is by spending time with God. So that's where it all comes down, and it all stems from that. So I'm hardcore on that one.
Yeah, yep, yeah. I could talk about it for forever. I think we probably both could talk about it forever. We do got to wrap up at some point. So I would love to hear something that is just a small thing, a big thing, anywhere in between that's bringing you joy right now? Something that's just fun and happy. Yeah, that you're really enjoying.
Well, that is a really good question. There is a video game called Astrobot for the PlayStation, and my son
Cool.
is 3 years old, and he's just getting to the point where he can figure out what the buttons are doing. And he's just like, within a week, he's better at the game than I am. And it's a
Of
kid's
course.
game, but we'll play it together. He's like, oh, this is too hard. And he'll hand me the controller. I'll do this one part and I hand it back to him and he does the rest. And it's
Yeah,
just been so much fun to see
that's cool.
him learning that like in real time, like assimilating what it takes to play a video game. And then
Yeah,
we'll sit in the same chair
that's
and do
awesome.
that together. So it's just been so much fun. And I do worry that I'm creating a monster who, get addicted to video games because I love doing it with him. So, oh, let's go play Astrobot.
Yeah,
And he loves it. But I don't think that's
that's
actually
awesome. That's
a big
awesome.
deal at the moment. Yeah. So that's bringing me a lot of joy lately.
That's so cool. That's fun. My husband is recently sharing a video game with our older girls. They're 9 and 8, and he has, like, been just it's, like, reignited so much in him from when we were kids and we were first started dating, and, like, it's been cool for him to be able to share that with them because then it's like a community thing, and we're growing as a family, and I just think it's a really cool way to approach that. Because there's so much cool stuff you can learn from playing a video game. It takes so much critical thinking and, like, creativity, and, like, there's so many cool things happening there, and all the cooler when you get to, like, see your kids experience that. It's so much fun.
Yeah, that's true. It's very nostalgic to go sit down and
Yeah.
actually just play a video game for a minute. As you get older, or at least for me, it's been like, oh, I don't have time for that. Or if you do make time, you're like, I feel bad because I should be doing something actually worthwhile and productive. But when I'm playing with him, it's just like I'm a kid again, we're just doing this right now and that's all that matters. So yeah, it's been
Yeah.
fun.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Thanks for sharing that. That's really sweet. I love that. How can people find you? I'm going to put links to everything in the show notes, but how do they like follow you on Substack and take advantage of all of the cool things that you do?
Yeah, I do only have a presence on Substack at the moment. This is one of those things where it's like, just get started and add the rest later. I don't know. At some point, I feel like it'd be good to have a website, but all that
Yes, sir.
stuff, I haven't gotten to that yet. And who knows if it'll happen anytime soon. But for now, it's just substack.com/at Grant Herbal, which is my name, which probably easier to follow the link. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
about
yeah,
it.
yeah. Cool, cool. Just make sure you're downloading the CSV file of your followers, which you're probably already doing. But
It's been a while. I do need to stay up on that. Yeah, that's
don't
a
forget,
thing in the
because if
back of my
that
mind.
just suddenly accidentally goes poof, then you have to start over again, and that would be awful.
That is a really good point. That's where it'd be good to have a domain name that redirects to the Substack so you can redirect later. Yeah, maybe I'll do that. Anyway,
Mhm.
for now, that's it.
Yeah. That's exciting. I think that that's wonderful. That's great. I think it's such a good example of just getting started because I think that what you're doing is just so important. And I'm very, very, very grateful for your time and for such good conversation. It's an honor to chat with you.
Same to you. Yeah. Thanks for setting it up. I appreciate it.
Okay, as we wrap up, I just want to say thank you so much for hanging out with us today. I hope that this episode blessed you. And if it did, would you please do me a favor and message me over on Instagram, find me on Substack, connect with me in whatever way you'd like. If you're on Spotify, you can leave a comment and just let me know what resonated with you, what encouraged you. Was there something that really stuck with you that you're going to implement this week? Because so much of the work that I get to do with clients is helping them to define clear goals and then set some realistic action steps that are going to align with their capacity to start making some faithful, steady progress towards those goals. And I kind of want to bring that here into this space when we get to have these dialogue episodes because there is so many practical things you can implement in your day to day. I know for myself, the thing that I walked away from this conversation with Grant feeling was just reminded at the significance of the written word, at the significance and the importance of and the worshipfulness that comes from writing and that comes from using that as a medium to glorify the Lord and bless our people. Absolutely. But also just as a place to like explore and have fun and allow yourself to be creative. And just, I think the thing that was really pressed upon me was just this reminder that writing matters and making time for it is important in whatever capacity you have in this season of your life. So I would be so curious to know what stood out to you, what was helpful to you about this episode. Again, if you haven't already, can you pretty please see I'm singing this song about it for you to help you remember? You're welcome. Leave me a review over on Apple Podcasts or hit the 5-star on Spotify. Okay, that's all. Talk next week. Bye.